Hi everyone, I'm Alex Dykes, and this is the 2013 Infiniti G37 Convertible. Now this model is their IPL model, which stands for Infiniti Performance Line, which means we get a slight power boost up front, we get some suspension tweaks, we get some interior tweaks, we of course get some upgraded brakes and some different tires. Now the Infiniti G series is of course being replaced by the Q50 mid-size sedan. Basically this year. We should know around June what that new Q50 looks like and is like to drive. And so you should be wondering, why are we looking at this G37 convertible right now? And the reason for that is that manufacturers typically don't refresh their convertibles or their coupes right away. So while Infiniti hasn't said specifically when we should expect a new convertible version of that Q50 or a coupe version, we expect this model to be around for at least a year or two after that new model has been introduced. So let's walk around, let's hop in, let's see if we can fit in the trunk and take a look. The G37 convertible has been around since 2008 as a 2009 model year, so it's been around for a decent amount of time in the luxury market. Now, you may think that this is simply a G37 coupe with its top sawn off, but that's not really the case. This convertible was designed as a convertible, so it doesn't ride on exactly the same FM platform as everything else in the lineup. Of course, that Nissan platform is used from everything from the Nissan Z all the way to the GTR and a number of Infiniti products in between. Now, what's different about this versus the coupe is we have a wider track, we have some very different suspension going on, we have a lot of different sheet metal, we of course have this fancy folding hardtop going on in this model as well. And all that adds to a decent amount weight increase in this particular vehicle. It's about 4,100 pounds, which is a several hundred-pound increase over the G37 coupe. The regular G37 convertible starts at $47,900 and our IPL convertible is $61,450. Now there are no options available on the IPL convertible because it comes essentially fully loaded. But if you load that regular G37 convertible up with almost all the options that are available on the IPL coupe, minus the slight power bump that we get under the hood, which we'll go over in a little bit, you come about $5,000 lower than the IPL convertible. Now, while that does sound a little bit expensive, it's right about in line with the Mercedes E350 convertible, the BMW 335 IS convertible, but the Lexus C350 convertible is a decent amount cheaper than this. For IPL duty, Infiniti didn't just stop at these gorgeous 19-inch specialty wheels on the IPL. We also get upgraded brake calipers and brake rotors from the G37S sedan, but they didn't change the rubber really. So up front we have 225 width tires and out back we have 245 width tires. Now the regular G37 convertible has this same staggered arrangement and essentially has the same profile tires, although the exact rubber choice is different. So here we get the Potenza RE050A tires, and that's different than the regular sedan or the regular coupe and convertible. Now up front we get the Infiniti G37 IPL chin spoiler. As you can see, it hits curbs very nicely, so be careful in parking lots with that. Now you can also get that on the G37 convertible in the sport trim as an option. It's about $2,000 option pack, and if you option up that G37 Sport to the same level without the power up, mind you, of course, in the IPL coupe and convertible, then you're about $5,000 cheaper, but you can get the 6-speed manual transmission. Not a whole lot's changed in the rear of the G37 for IPL duty. We of course have the IPL badge, we still have the cute little tiny radio antenna, but we have these two huge exhaust pipes back here because the G37 does have a much louder exhaust than the regular G37 convertible. Supposedly that does help add to the horsepower bump on this engine, and let's hop under the hood for that now. Under the hood we have an IPL modified version of Infiniti's VQ engine. Now this is a 3.7 liter V6 and it makes 343 horsepower and 273 pound-feet of torque. Now while there is a 6-speed manual version available in the G37 Sport, the IPL convertible, which gets this power bump from about 325 horsepower, does not have that manual transmission option. So the only transmission you can get is the standard Infiniti 7-speed automatic, which sends power to the rear wheels only. This generation of Infiniti G interior has been around for a decent amount of time, and it's not exactly fresh when you compare it to the BMW 3 Series coupe and convertible or that new Mercedes E350 convertible. As such, we get this injection molded dashboard here, which does look attractive, but it's not quite as nice as some of the faux stitched or real stitched alternatives in the competition. Since we have an IPL model, we of course get this brushed stainless look going on here in the center console instead of wood, which continues down the center console and across all the doors. Now we do have a tilt telescoping steering column, but unlike the competition, the gauge binnacle also tilts with the steering wheel. This is sort of an interesting treatment. Infiniti calls this sort of a fighter jet look. I'm not clear if I like it or not, but it does make those gauges easy to see regardless of how the steering wheel is adjusted. Of course, Infiniti always likes to put their controls way far away from the driver, so of course here we have the dimmer controls for the gauge cluster, and over here we have our trip computer buttons. Down the steering wheel we have Infiniti's usual 3-spoke wheel, which is a great wheel to hold. It has some nice sport grips on it. We have stitched contrasting stitching here on the steering wheel for our IPL coupe. If we turn the steering wheel like this, you can see that we have some of the best paddle shifters available on the market at any price. This is something that Nissan and Infiniti do very, very well. And these are very similar to the paddle shifters that you even get on the Nissan Altima. That just kind of shows the dedication that Nissan and Infiniti have to the whole paddle concept. On the Infiniti, they're not just magnesium, but they're also leather wrapped. That's this two-tone effect that you can see going on here, and they're attached to the steering column. A lot of people seem to like these paddle shifters that are on the column rather than on the wheel. My personal preference is to have the paddles on the wheel, however, so that way when the wheels turn like this and you're still holding at 3 and 9, that you can still actuate the paddle shifters. But for some reason, a lot of people seem to prefer them on the steering column. I don't really see that there's that much difference, honestly, but these paddle shifters are excellent. And of course, the 7-speed automatic transmission that's mated to these paddle shifters is very good as well. Now, Mercedes products don't like to cue shifts, so if you're trying to shift down 3 gears and you hit the down paddle shift 3 times, this transmission will actually remember that. And if it can downshift 3 gears, it will downshift 3 gears. The Mercedes transmission doesn't do that. You have to pull down, it'll downshift, wait for it to downshift, then you have to pull again, wait for it to downshift, then you have to pull again and again and again. And that's really kind of annoying. Now, some of the other competitors, you can pull down and hold all the way down. That's kind of an interesting feature. This car doesn't do that. But what Infiniti does do is it actually holds you in the gear. So if that gauge says that you're in gear 3 and you've paddle shifted to gear 3, it will stay in gear 3 whether you lug the engine or whether you hit the rev limiter. It will stay there until you tell it to shift. Front seat comfort in the G37 convertible is very good. Of course, you'd expect that at $61,000. Now, unlike the Mercedes and the BMW convertibles, we don't have 4-way adjustable lumbar supports. This one only goes in and out, and the seat doesn't contort in quite as many ways as BMW's sport seat. We do have an active headrest for whiplash prevention, and these funky little things right here attached to the side of the headrest are actually surround sound speakers, and those are unique to the convertible. In addition to the regular Bose surround sound processing and the regular surround sound that comes out of the rear speakers in the car, we get additional surround sound speakers right here in the front and driver and the front passenger headrest. The G37 is a 4-seat convertible, so let's see what those back seats are like. Now, because it's a convertible, of course, we have this little strap to hold the rear seat belt because the seat belts aren't integrated into the seats. They're the same seats that are used in the coupe. That means getting in the back is a little bit trickier for the driver because, of course, the driver would have to re-snap their seat belt like that. Now, rear seat room isn't as bad as it could be in a convertible. My knees are, of course, touching this front seat, and the seat back angle in this convertible is a little bizarre. That's, pretty normal in convertibles, however, because they shape these seat backs to try and maximize the legroom. So your butt's kind of further back in the seat so that way your knees aren't digging quite so far into the front seat. Actually, strapping yourself in is a little bit more complicated because this seat belt is quite low in the seat back. It's not really designed for real adults going on back here, and there are, of course, only 4 seats in the convertible. We're going to have to take our trunk comfort index in 2 separate parts because, of course, the top for this convertible goes into the trunk, and this trunk isn't terribly large. So if the top is not in the trunk, we scored 2 to 3 out of 10 points in our exclusive trunk comfort index. Let's take a look at that trunk when the top is in here, though. Infiniti tells us that cargo space is reduced to 1.9 cubic feet when the top is down like this. It's really not a whole lot of room. If you compare this to something like the BMW 6 Series convertible, which is a big convertible, you have about 5 times this cargo space. Even something like the Volkswagen Beetle convertible has about 9 times this cargo space. Really, all you have is this tiny little compartment here, and it doesn't really move a whole lot, and it has to be latched in place for the top to operate. Now, there is a small cargo compartment underneath this as well, but it's really only about big enough for maybe 2 or 3 suits if they're crumpled up and shoved in there. You can't access that with this top in place, however. So as a representative of what you can fit in here, we have a few household items to show you how big this is. First, we have a jacket. So that's a regular old winter jacket. That fits in there quite nicely. And next, we have a shopping bag. This is just sort of a regular old canvas shopping bag. We can shove that in there as well. We have a stick blender, in case you need to blend while you're gone. That fits in there. And of course, that lid is nicely snapped on. We have a can of chili. That fits in there too in case you get peckish on your trip. And last but not least, if you need to take a friend with you, we have a wooden duck, which of course everyone has at home. And Donald fits in there quite nicely as well. Performance, of course, suffers because of the added weight of the convertible top versus the coupe. So our 0 to 60 time takes about half a second more than the IPL coupe, but it is about a tenth of a second faster than the regular G37 convertible. Still, that's not a huge difference when you compare that to the manual transmission G37 convertible, which runs the 0 to 60 time just about the same as this 7-speed automatic version. A note on practicality, you can see that in the seat behind me, I have my luggage there because I'm headed off for the weekend, but there isn't even room in this convertible for one person's luggage in the trunk, and that's because that little cargo area underneath the convertible top that's in the trunk, you really can't fit a normal sized bag in there. You can fit maybe a very small garment bag unfolded in there, probably empty. The IPL suspension upgrades are immediately noticeable out on the road. This model is a great deal stiffer than the regular G37 convertible. That's something that I'm not sure if I like because it does seem to amplify the chassis flex in a convertible. And any convertible is going to flex an awful lot more than a coupe. And even though Infiniti has done a great deal of work trying to strengthen this chassis and trying to keep those vibrations and flexations to a minimum, they still happen here in the G37 convertible. And with the IPL springs and suspension, they are a bit more noticeable out on the road. Still, the G37 convertible has always been an excellent handling convertible in this segment. Definitely the equal or superior to the BMW 335, and it's all down to feel. The G37 is not the absolute best corner gripper. You know, we only have 225s up front, 245s in the rear, so our grip is limited by that rubber. But the feel behind the wheel is excellent. You know, we still have hydraulic power steering here, and the steering is very precise. It's very quick in this model. The IPL has a slightly quicker steering gear. That's also something you get in the G37 Convertible Sport, however, so that is another thing to keep in mind when you're considering the IPL. Same steering as in the Sport. But it is very precise, very accurate. There's a great deal more road feel, honestly, than in the BMW 335, and that's thanks to BMW's electric power steering that's progressing across pretty much everybody else in the market. And really, the G37 convertible only has this hydraulic power steering because of its age. Again, it's a 2008 model, and that new Q50 sedan, and we expect a convertible version of that Q50 at some point, is not going to have hydraulic steering. It's not going to have electric power steering. It probably will have Infiniti's new steer-by-wire system, where there is no direct mechanical linkage under normal circumstances between the steering wheel and the front tires. The sound of the engine in the G37 is one of its best features, which is a good thing because you really have to rev this engine quite a bit in order to get the power out of it. 343 horsepower come out, but only at 7,400 RPM, so you really have to rev this engine very high in order to get the power out of it. It reminds me an awful lot of BMW's old naturally aspirated inline-6 engines. It has a somewhat similar growl, and of course the IPL exhaust in our model really sort of accentuates the growl in that V6. Some people prefer a V8 noise, some people like that turbo whine, but I prefer a naturally aspirated engine sound any day. Because you really have to rev this engine high in order to get the power, it has a very different feel behind the wheel to the Mercedes E350. And we do have more power going on here in the G37 than the E350, but the way that it's delivered is also quite different. That 3.5-liter V6 from Mercedes-Benz has a lower power curve, so you feel a lot more mid-range torque in that engine than you do in this VQ engine from Infiniti. The paddle shifters are an awful lot of fun, but what's even more fun is just the way the chassis behaves in the G37 convertible. Infiniti has tuned this chassis to be an awful lot more lively than the BMW 335 IS or the Mercedes E350. Again, there's not quite as much grip, but the car does get an awful lot more tail happy, and that's true of all the G37s, the G37 Coupe, the G37 Sedan, and of course this G37 convertible. You can have an awful lot more fun on your winding mountain roads with excellent spot-on feel in the steering, as well as a little bit of oversteer going on in the back if you're not careful. And if you want to disable that traction control, this car will let you do donuts and spin around in circles and, you know, hit any tree or any telephone pole that you're after. I would keep the nanny on myself, again, because this car is somewhat tail happy and quite lively out on the road, especially when you're right around that 6,000 to 7,000 RPM mark. The Lexus IS 350 convertible is quite similar to this G37 convertible in that it's really just a sports package. You know, we get stiffer springs, wider tires, some unique wheels, some different seats inside the car, some slightly different body cladding, of course, on the outside. But the Lexus doesn't get any more power than this Infiniti G37 does, so you still get the same amount of power out of that 3.5-liter V6. But still, the feel behind the wheel is quite similar. They're very similar 0 to 60 times, and the way that they drive, because they're both high-revving, naturally aspirated engines, is quite similar. So out on the road, the Lexus and the Infiniti are very good competitors with one another. Now, the Lexus is getting a little bit old, but we expect it to be refreshed slightly before this G37 convertible, because of course the Lexus IS sedan has just been released a few months ago, and Lexus has already intimated that the convertible model will follow fairly soon after, with no specific dates, of course. Infiniti has not commented at all on the G37 convertible's replacement, but again, we do expect that at some point soon. Now that Volvo's out of the convertible market, at least for a while, there's no luxury front-wheel drive convertible to compare the G37 to, which is probably a good thing because a lot of people dislike the way that front-wheel drive cars behave. The whole understeer thing going on versus the oversteer nature in a rear-wheel drive sedan is just something a lot of purists don't really care for. The G37 may not be young, but at least it's aged very well. There's of course also one less competitor for it this year, with Volvo no longer making the C70 convertible, which really did compete directly with the G37 convertible, mostly because of its price and the brand image. Of course, we now have the BMW 335 with its twin-scroll turbo inline-6 engine, which has a very different feel from this naturally aspirated engine. We of course have the Mercedes E350, which is a lot softer. It's really not as sporty as anything from Infiniti. Even the regular G37 convertible is a lot stiffer and firmer than that E-Series convertible. So what we have here is something like a Japanese interpretation of what BMW's convertibles used to be. It definitely has a very peaky engine in it, which is an awful lot of fun to rev. It sounds really great. It doesn't sound like a turbocharged engine. It has sort of a more pure V6 sound. But when you take all those things together, I'm still not sure whether I would take a BMW 335 IS convertible over this. Now, the 335 IS is going to cost you a bit more than this G37 IPL, but it will bring much newer features and a much newer interior to the table. All in all, the G37 IPL convertible is a great convertible if you like the G37 and you want that extra boost. If you're looking just at the G37 convertible, then my recommendation would actually be for the G37 Sport model with the 6-speed manual transmission. You're going to save a little bit of money, and of course with that manual transmission, you're going to be almost as fast as this car as well. That's been our quick take at the G37 convertible. Thanks for watching us, and of course you can just click on that subscribe bar at the bottom of your screen to go ahead and subscribe to this YouTube channel. You can check us out on Facebook, go check us out at thetruthaboutcars.com, and as always, be sure and comment in that comment section down below. Tell us what you liked, what you didn't like, and of course what you'd like to see next. Oh, I lost a shoe. Well, maybe I should just get out. Still recording. I can't get my shoe out of the car. It's like really stuck.